I call the September 21st, 2022 BZA meeting, Beavercreek Township BZA meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Thomas? Roll call. Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Mepkinsick?
Here.
Mrs. Stotwald?
Here.
Mrs. Brick?
Oh, do I have to be? Okay.
No, she's not on the roll call.
I was gonna say, you have to give me a roll call.
Mr.
Sorry.
Weber?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have a staff report, please?
I'll just quickly read the public hearing notice as we typically do at the beginning. This is the purpose of the hearings that so the BZA may continue to review and act on a variance request originally heard on August 17th, 2022. Case number 862, wherein a request was made by property owners Sean and Jacqueline Smith for the property located at 1778 Ash Meadow Court, Greene County parcel ID B03002 0038 0009900. The nature of the request is to seek a variance from the requirement that accessory structures must be located not less than 10 feet from side or rear lot lines, and that's pursuant to Article 18.053 of the Township Zoning Resolution. The parcel is currently zoned PUD R1AA. The applicant desires to allow an existing pool house structure to remain located closer to their property line than the 10 feet which is allowable in the code. The staff report is slightly modified from what you saw in our previous meeting. I've highlighted the updated recommendations from staff following discussions with legal counsel, with Township Legal Counsel. The rest of the facts of the case remain the same. Again, I wanted to kind of reset our focus here. And Dawn can explain in a little bit more detail. She'll give you a short summary of her thoughts and memo, but essentially the BZA should stick to the question at hand, which is the fence or the shed, and whether or not it should be allowed to remain in its same position or whether or not it needs to be moved in order to conform to the zoning resolution. Staff believes that it was overzealous to bring into the discussion the issue of whether or not the fence, was over the property line or not. It is not the purview of the zoning office to make that determination, and so based on the limited to no ability to enforce any such conditions that might be placed regarding the location of that fence being over the property line or not. The staff's updated recommendation is to grant the proposed variance. Again, staff has been informed by Township Legal Counsel that the fence line dispute is a matter that must be resolved between private parties and without township intervention. This being the case, staff is focused entirely on the shed in question. Staff does not believe the current location of the shed to be injurious in any practical way. Again, we included the section of the code, 18.053. We have the original application as well, and the same pictures that you viewed at the previous hearing. Do you have any questions for me about the revised staff report?
Any questions?
Yes. Couple things. They would never come before the Board of Zoning Appeals for a fence variance when the fence is on somebody else's property.
Correct.
Because we can't grant a fence variance for a fence being on somebody else's property to leave it there.
That's correct.
Okay? And they would never come in for a variance to move it back, because that would be then in accordance with zoning code.
That's correct.
Again, the zoning department issued a fence permit. It is the zoning department's job to enforce the fence permit, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. Why can't, who is going, you just stated that it's not the zoning department's job to oversee fences that might be on somebody else's property.
Well,
So does this become a civil matter between the two parties and the zoning department's completely out of it? How about code enforcement?
so I did say that determining whether or not a structure is or is not over a property line is not within our purview. Not necessarily that's not our job. We don't have the ability. We don't have the technical knowledge nor the equipment to make that determination. So,
But hold on, stop right there. So when a person comes in for a fence permit, you're saying other than taking their money, you have no other means to enforce that permit?
no, I'm not saying that. In fact, the zoning inspector goes and informs an inspection when the fence is staked. So before it's actually put in place, when the markers for poles and the general configuration of the fence line is
Right, no survey lines are
correct.
in place.
Correct.
They go out and visually,
And to the best of their ability,
Okay.
which usually includes a combination of looking at the GIS to
yes,
see roughly where the property line is,
Okay.
using any indicators. You know, if it's egregiously over, that's one thing, right? If it's
It is.
10 feet over, it's obvious to the naked eye, right?
right,
That would, in that case, the zoning inspector would say, hey, you know, you said it was on the property line. It's very clear that this is not on the property line.
okay, let's talk about it already being constructed, which it is. The zoning permit was issued many years ago.
Yes.
Don't know if anyone ever went out and inspected it after.
It's highly unlikely based
Okay.
on my knowledge of previous practice.
So I was told at one time that our zoning department is very limited on what their manpower, and they only react on complaints. And of course, go out on new permits and check those out.
For the most part, that's
Okay.
true, yes.
So now that this fence issue has been brought to our attention, along with the barn issue and the landscaping issues that we can't have no say about the landscaping issues. We're not putting conditions on there that says you gotta move the landscaping if we approve the barn staying where it's at. Our only chance as a township to get that fence moved is to put a condition on to possibly us approving to leave the barn where it's at.
That's not correct. Okay, so
Who enforces it?
the enforcement mechanism of the township is through the zoning inspector. And then if the
Okay.
zoning inspector finds a violation,
Okay,
okay, which the zoning inspector can potentially do or not, and somebody disagrees with that, whether it be one or both of the property owners, then that appeal comes to you all. But you don't have the ability at this stage, when there is an appeal of the zoning inspector's position, that comes to the BZA.
Don, what would they be coming and do appeal to us if the zoning inspector says it's on somebody else's property?
Well, if the zoning inspector says there's a violation and
Right.
somebody else believes they're not,
Okay.
they come to you to appeal whether or not there is a violation.
But in this case, it's already been identified there's a violation.
No.
No, and it's not
Why?
your position to be able to make that determination. The BZA is not statutorily granted that authority.
Who is?
The zoning inspectors,
But she said she would come in for, the landowner would come in for, and to the Board of Zoning Appeals for what?
So,
If the fence is clear over on somebody else's property, what would they be coming to us for?
Leo, so let's say, for the sake of argument, person A calls and says, hey, my neighbor's fence. Well, let's not use that because, again, it hinges on our ability to determine whether or not that's the case. And we don't have that ability. That's something I want to
We all know by
So let's
the
say it's,
GIS, which is in the ballpark.
so let's say
Oh.
that it's, my neighbor's shed is right on the property line,
Okay.
and that's a violation. And they call
Okay.
and complain to us and say, and we go investigate it and find, yes, that is the case.
Okay.
Our typical response is to say, hey, there's a zoning violation on your property. We typically invite them to come in for a BZA for a variance. Now, if that person who we have been working with instead says, I disagree, this is not a violation, I don't believe that it is, then they can instead come into the BZA to appeal that decision of the zoning inspector that a violation exists.
If there has been a formal determination of a violation.
We've,
So if you're cited for a violation.
we've had cases.
Neither has been
in-
cited for a violation.
In the past,
Correct.
though,
So it's,
where they've come in and asked for the variance after it's already been built. So we've already dealt with that. It's never been but it's always been a case, Leo, where they're dealing with their own property. We've never dealt with a situation where you've got issues with the property line in itself.
How does,
Clearly, we have done it before, where people come in because they put a building too close to the property line and ask for a variance.
or they
after
want to
it's-
put a building
Well,
closer
no,
to the
no,
property.
yeah, if they want to, that's the right way to do it, but there's been some cases where they've
Yes.
already had the building built.
Horses out of the barn, I understand. Where is the enforcement with the zoning department, not us, to go out and require this landowner to put his fence on his property? Where's the mechanism that will create that to happen?
So I think, if I'm understanding right, I'm thinking like in a criminal context, right? So the cops can see you speeding, they can give you a warning, but they can give you a ticket. But if they don't give you a warning, or they don't give you a ticket and they just let you go, no personal citizen can come in and say, they were speeding, I wanna see them in court. That's what's going on. The zoning inspector hasn't come in and said, there's a problem, so as people, they can't come in and say there's a problem.
and typically, and we have had these, and frankly, I think it's before your time, where the last one I can think about is where there was ultimately, because typically we will work with, if there is a potential zoning violation, the zoning department will work with the people to remedy the violation before they issue a formal zoning violation. Once they issue a zoning violation, which says you have to remedy this within a certain amount of time, or there are fines, fees, things like that.
Okay,
An individual at that point can then choose to either fix it, pay the ongoing fines, or appeal that determination to the BZA.
okay. So, the landowner that's in violation with his fence, if he is, that all indications he is, because the neighbor whose yard he's in violation of brought up the fence, brought up the building and all of that. So he comes in for a variance for the building, okay? You're saying, where I'm not following you is, our zoning inspector goes out because homeowner on the left says his fence is on my property. She goes out and she investigates it. Yes, his fence is 6 feet over on your property. I just use that number. So she tells the people that have the non-conforming fence, they gotta move the fence. You're saying they can then come to the BZA and appeal her saying that they need to move the fence.
Yeah, we've done that multiple times before.
How can, no, we've
Yes,
never.
you are a quasi judicial body.
We have
and
we've never been told anyone in here, since I've been on here, that they have to move their fence off of somebody else's property.
because we've not had that issue come before us.
But we
But we
certainly
have
have.
certainly had zoning violations which have been appealed to the BZA.
That could render a yes or no decision. Okay,
But in all of those cases, I'm going to make an assumption, was dealing with the person who owned a property, and the violation was concerning about something on his property, not
that hadn't
necessarily,
been built yet?
or was built yet, but wasn't across the property line, it was still on his property, or are we dealing with something that was actually built on his neighbor's property?
Well, I mean,
all I
it could
know
be
is-
any number of zoning
Sure,
violations
I
under the
understand
zoning
that,
code, yes.
I'm just asking for a clarification.
Somebody dropped the ball years ago on this situation.
But the reality is too, you know, it frankly is, there is a property line dispute between two property owners.
Correct.
Okay, in terms of enforcement mechanisms, on something, there's a statute that provides that. Again, a township is a statutory creature. You cannot do anything unless it is authorized by statute. So one of the statutory provisions that allows you to do it is the township would have to sue the property owner for an injunction. But only the Board of Trustees can do that. The BZA cannot do that.
Oh, I know
You
that.
don't have the enforcement mechanism to do it.
I've never
And you all
suggested that.
are a separate body than the Board of Trustees.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Nobody's saying that we can enforce, nobody's saying that we have the ability to enforce them moving a fence, other than the fact that we issued the permit, and we should be able to, I feel, my opinion, just like elbows, everybody has them, is that this is our chance for the township, and the simplest way to get the fence moved is to put a condition on the approval of the barn, so.
But again, when you say
Press
we,
on.
you're saying we as the township, we have to look at it from the authority you as a BZA body has. The township may have certain authority. The BZA as a body
Has certain
doesn't
authority.
have that authority.
Right, I agree. So, I totally disagree with that, but let's press on. That's just
Any
for the
other,
record.
any other questions? No. And I understand, and a recommendation has been presented to me, since we are dealing with the just the variance for the shed, and that it was well covered in last month's meeting. Is it necessary to open it to public hearing? Do we have to do that?
Did you close the public
Yes, we,
portion of it? Then you
yes,
do
you
not
did.
have to, because did you just continue the case?
yes.
Then no, you don't reopen the public portion of the
Okay.
hearing.
In that case, we will not be taking any
Public input.
public input. Gonna open it up within the board. Is there anything within the board that needs to be discussed?
Only thing is,
I mean, I think we should grant it.
yeah, the shed is an average of 9.5 feet from the property line. And if we make it move 10 feet from the property line, it's on only a half a foot.
Well, it's
And-
farther
and I don't
away.
see
It's
how-
closer than that.
What?
Yeah.
It's closer than a foot.
I just
What
don't-
it's, I'm talking about an average. There's one corner is 12 feet, the other
One's
corner is
9.5.
7 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's 9.5 feet average.
Yeah,
And I don't know how
we've approved them on the property line, so.
so I don't see why we wouldn't grant the variance.
So with that, do I have a motion to grant the variance as requested?
Where are we? I make a motion that we grant the variance to case number 862 as submitted.
As submitted. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a roll call, please.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Yes?
Ms. Stotwell?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
No.
All right, thank you, board.
With that, the request has passed.
So, what we will do, for the applicant, we'll have a piece of paper, we'll fill this out shortly, that it basically says, the variance has been granted, there won't be any conditions listed on it because there were none placed by the BZA. In, you know, a number of days, we'll draft a resolution of the BZA's decision, and we'll go ahead and send you a copy of that as well. So that will, if there are any questions from anybody, that will serve as your proof that you do indeed have the variance for this route.
This whole thing is stupid.
Yeah, you won't get the resolution tonight. Here in just a little bit, I'm gonna get with Carolyn and we'll fill this with this temporary sheet out, just how we kind of.
The ball, and they issued a permit, they never went out and inspected it. Then they say, oh, we should do property lines. We don't know where the property lines are. We'll just write this as a visual from a hand-drawn letter.
Okay, if that's all we have on that request, I would like to be able to move down to the acceptance of the minutes.
So again, that was case number 857 on April 18th is the first set of minutes for your consideration.
Does anybody on the board have anything to submit on that particular case?
Got
Can I have a motion to accept the minutes 857, please?
I move to accept the minutes 857 from April 18th.
I second it.
Roll call.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Martenza?
Yes?
Ms. Scotwall?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Now, the minutes for BZA 858 for the meeting 5/23/22, please. Do I have any questions or input on those minutes? May I have a
Yeah, I move to accept the minutes as submitted for BZA 858, fence heights, 522.
do I have a second?
I second.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Martenza?
Yes?
Ms. Scotwall?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
And minutes for BZA 859 on 5/23/22. I was gonna say how to distinguish, but two different requests. Yeah. Do I have any requests or inputs for that? Do I have a motion to accept?
Can't read it. What is it? I move to accept the BZA minutes of 859 fence height from May 23rd, 2022.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Vote, please.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Martenza?
Yes?
Ms. Scotwall?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Now, BZA 868, again on 5/23/22. Do I,
6-0.
6-0.
did I say 868?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I apologize, 860.
And this was a full location variance.
Right. Any,
That's right.
a motion for approval?
I move to accept the minutes of BZA 860 pool location on 5/23/22.
I second it.
Call, please.
Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Martenza?
Yes?
Ms. Scotwall?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
And then, again, the minutes for BZA 861, fence height for 5/23/22, please.
Nothing. Okay. I move to accept the BZA minutes of 861 fence height 5/23/22.
I second it.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Martenza?
Yes?
Ms. Scotwall?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any new business to be present to the board, please?
I will just take this opportunity to remind the board that we are currently engaged in our comprehensive land use plan update. I know Brent Huntsman serves as a member of our steering committee, and we're very thankful for that. I would encourage you guys to visit thecommunityplan.com and participate in the online survey activity that we have up right now that requests kind of just your input on the township, where we want to be in the future. It's an interesting activity, and so we would really appreciate your input on that. We do have a workshop coming up on September 28th here in this room from 6 to 7:30 p.m. It is a kind of in-person version of that mapping activity. We would also encourage you to attend if you think that would be valuable to you. We would really appreciate your input on that, and if you'd like to share that information with anybody in the community, we would appreciate that as well.
When was that?
That is next Wednesday, September 28th, from 6 to 7:30 in this room.
And the website for,
It is thecommunityplan.com. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention for that. I have nothing else for you.
No other news business? Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
can I ask one? Can we talk about the BZA book after we close the meeting?
The BZA, oh, sure.
Other topics? Just
Yeah,
to-
absolutely. If you have like some procedural questions, I'd be glad to
Okay.
talk with you. Yeah.
So I move to close the zoning board meeting of 9/21/22.
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye,
Aye. I forgot to ask for a second. Is there a second and all in favor?
I second.
All in favor, aye.